Hi there, everyone. My name is Sawyer Martini, the current vice chair of AIAAMU, and today I'm going to be showing you how we're going to be using Fusion 360 to keep track of all of the changes that we're going to be making to our full avionics unit model, and how we can also use Fusion 360 to create a assembly for something, then put other people's assemblies into that big assembly, and everything updates. Let's get right into it. All right, so right now I have Fusion 360 pulled up, as well as the avionics unit checklist. Okay, and we're going to go into the AIAA Fusion 360 drive. We're going to go into MURPL. We're going to go into our current project. Right now it's Project Aurora. Then we're going to go into avionics. Within avionics, we're going to have a whole bunch of folders, one of them being for the avionics unit, which is the full 3D model, as well as the components that make up the basic structure of the 3D model. There's the nose cone bay, the recovery bay, the telemetry bay, the experimental payload bay, and ground control units, as well as screws, which are common screws that are going to be used within all of those models, and finally trash. I'm going to get into what each of these folders do, but let's figure out how we can do what we set out to do. So we're going to go into the avionics unit folder, and the first thing here is 1.0 avionics unit full assembly. We're going to click on that, and now we're going to see that this is the full 3D model assembly, which is made up of other smaller assemblies within here. And this is going to be the general makeup of the avionics unit. And as you can see, I have labeled most of the parts and most of the assemblies within here, such as the experimental unit 1, experimental unit 2, and if we zoom in here, recovery bay, the mission critical systems, and as well as the telemetry bay, non-mission critical systems. Now, both of those bays currently are their own assemblies, and I'm going to show you how we can edit one of those assemblies and have it update on this big assembly. So let's go into, let's keep this open. Let's go into the avionics unit, avionics folder as well. And now we're going to go into the telemetry bay. The first thing right here is going to be telemetry bay assembly. We're going to open that up. And we are going to see that this is the current assembly, which can be found inside of the full avionics unit assembly. For instance, if we want to put in another one of these cameras, we're going to click Insert. It'll go into 0, 0. And then we're going to rotate it to the correct angle. Click Save. And now we're going to make a joint with this camera and with the current assembly. The way to do that is if we spin around to the back of the camera, assemblies work best with holes or joints. And a good way to keep track of that is whatever hole, if you have a hole here, you're going to want to put that hole and join it to a hole on whatever you want to join it to. So those holes can line up. It's not like Inventor, where if there's a face and another face, and you join those two faces, and then it's going to be able to move on the X or Y axis or whatever axis you are on, and then you have to join another face to another face, and then it won't move around. This is a simpler way of putting two things together, and Fusion has done a very good job at that. So we're going to do that by using this joint command. You can also do that by pressing Control J. We're going to go into this one hole right here, click that hole, and we can see exactly where that joint is going to be placed. Then we're going to spin around onto this assembly, and we're going to find another hole. It's a lot easier if a hole has been made for that to join to. We're going to make it joined to this hole right here. Those two holes will line up. From there, we can move this to wherever we want. And as we can see, it will be flush with this plate right here, unless we tell it not to be flush. We can offset it as well. But right now we want it to be flush. So we're going to move it around. Let's do it to this bottom right-hand corner down here. And let's say we're happy with that. Press enter. And then we're going to press save. We're going to click OK. You can also denote your name if you want to keep track of who's doing all of these changes and type it, but we're not going to do that. It's just taking too much time. We're going to go back onto this full avionics assembly, and we're going to see that one component is out of date. Now we're going to make it up to date by clicking that button. It's going to compute all the changes, and then we're going to see, oh, look at that. Another camera has been added to this assembly, and it's generally in the right place that we want it to be. And if we go back here and we want to edit the joint, we can do that by double clicking that exact joint that we just made. Let's say we want to move it to the other side right here. Click OK. Click Save. Click OK. Go back into the avionics assembly. We're going to update it, and we're going to see that camera move to the other side. Like magic, everything is up to date and in the spot that we want it. You can also change the materials that are being used. So like, let's say if we don't want to use acrylic, which this is right now, in this assembly, we can click on that face. Actually, we can go over here to the certain part that it is, the TB vertical sled mount. We can right-click it, click on Appearance, or Control A. It'll bring up this window, which I had minimized, and we can go into, let's say we want to make it wood. We can make that appear like wood by going into wood or wood solid. Let's go into wood right now, and let's make it look like cherry. So we're going to put that into in this design. We're going to make this a little easier to see. It's kind of all smushed together right now because I have multiple windows open. We're going to drag that onto the part that we want. We're going to close it. Hit save. Now we're going to try and change the material being used in this sled. So we have to go into this specific part right here, the TB vertical sled mount. We're going to find that in the same folder. Here it is. We're going to open it. And we're going to change the material being used by right-clicking it, going into Appearances. Let's say we want to use cherry. We're going to put that into this design. We're going to left-click and drag it onto the part, and then we can see that the part updates the material being used. Let's press OK. Save it. Save. That updates the part. Then we're going to go into the assembly. Click this button right here. This will update the assembly and change that part to the material that we are going to be using. Let's go into the full avionics assembly. Click update on that. That changes the parts material that we want to use. Simple, easy, and this is how everyone stays on the same page about what changes we have made with anything, and it lets you, the telemetry bay specialist or the recovery bay specialist or experimental unit 1 specialist, experimental unit 2 specialist, to make changes to your assembly when you need to. Click save, and then the project manager can update the full assembly and see what changes have been made and stays in the loop with what everyone is doing. And that is how we're going to be using Fusion moving forward, how we're going to keep track of all the parts, and how we're going to all stay on the same page. Now, keeping track with all of the parts. As you can see over on the right side of the screen, I have the avionics unit component list up right here, which lists out all the parts being used by each assembly. So one of them being the avionics unit, it lists the coupler tube, coupler ring, drogue parachutes, all of these. It states whether they've been modeled, and then it goes on to the next assembly. One of them being the nose cone bay, one of them being the recovery bay. And all of the items within, say, the recovery bay are all of the components within the recovery bay are listed out right here. So it's the recovery bay assembly includes the perpendicular sled mount, the vertical sled mount, the high stress steel nylon insert locking nuts, the RRC3 altimeter, RRC2 altimeter, 9-volt battery, 9-volt battery holster, everything down to the nuts and bolts that are going to be used on that assembly are going to be listed right here. So it's kind of like a Lego. You can keep track of all the parts and pieces that are pertaining to your assembly and that you need to model and include on your assembly so that the full avionics unit is up to date and we don't forget any of the parts or components that you're going to be using. So let's go over to avionics, recovery bay. As we can see, all of the parts listed in the recovery bay, or at least mostly until I get them up to date, are the parts and components listed in the avionics unit component list. We're going to do our best to keep that up to date. That's how we know what components are being used and what components are not being used. Now, let's say we have a component listed in here that we've decided that we're not going to use. So we're going to find it. For instance, let's go to the, I don't know. Let's say we're not going to be using in the telemetry bay, we've decided we're not going to be using the RTX GPS logger system. If we are in the telemetry bay folder, we're going to find the RTX GPS logger system, right-click it, click Move, MURPL, Project Aurora, Avionics. We're going to put that into the trash folder. This lets us have things that we've 3D modeled that we thought we're going to use. We've decided we're not going to use them. Lets us put them into a trash folder so that we don't delete them out of existence. We can keep them. That moves it into the trash, and we're going to check that trash folder. And all these components or drawings are things that, or full avionics assemblies, are things that we're not going to be using. But we still have access to them. So if we say, oh no, we are actually going to be using the RTX GPS logger, we can go down to it, click Move, MURPL, Project Aurora, Avionics, and we're going to put it back into the telemetry bay folder. That takes it out of the trash and puts it back into the folder where we're going to need it to build its assembly. All right. So if you have any further questions, definitely reach out to the project manager or rewatch this video. It might be updated in future for future versions to make it easier to understand, but this should be how we all keep things up to date and stay on the same page. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I hope whatever project you're working on now gets built and you have a great flight at Spaceport. All right. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.